My name is Emmy, and if you'd asked me a few years ago if I could ever truly make a life on my own terms, I would have smiled and nodded, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. It wasn't the work I had to put in that made me doubt myself. It was the world. The world that wasn't kind to people like me, people who were different, who didn't fit the mold of what society thought was normal. I was born with a spinal condition that keeps my legs from working, but my mind was always the fire that pushed me forward. I grew up in a quiet Seattle suburb, a place that was more serene than welcoming. As a kid, I didn't understand why the other children stared, whispered behind my back, or sometimes made cruel remarks. I was just like them, just in a different package. My family was my refuge from the cruelty of the world. My parents, gone too soon in a car accident when I was just 9, had filled my childhood with nothing but love. They raised me to believe I could do anything. To them, my wheelchair was not something that defined me. They instilled in me a powerful sense of purpose that never faded. After they passed, my older brother Anthony became my anchor. He was 5 years older than me, and while he was still a teenager trying to navigate the tough world of high school, he was also my protector. After losing our parents, Anthony was the only constant in my life. I still remember those nights on the porch of our foster home. We'd sit there, side by side, staring up at the stars over Puget Sound, making promises to each other that no matter what happened, we'd make it. We didn't know exactly what that meant back then, but we believed it with all our hearts. He gave up so much for me: college parties, carefree summers, just to make sure I was okay. When I needed to go to physical therapy, Anthony would drive me. When I had a big school presentation, he'd be there, cheering me on from the front row, always telling me I was unstoppable. And for years, I believed him. That belief carried me far. Through every school year, every challenging class, I pushed myself. I excelled, even when some teachers doubted my abilities. My scholarships piled up, and soon I was studying engineering at the University of Washington. I started my company, Empower Tech, from a tiny office in downtown Seattle, a dream that seemed almost impossible when I was a kid. We design adaptive technology, wheelchairs, prosthetics, things that allow people like me to live life on our own terms. My company was small, but it was my everything. Now, it was worth hundreds of millions with clients across the globe. Still, with all the success, there was always this lingering fear that when people saw me, they only saw the chair. Every boardroom I rolled into, every new client I met, I had to smile and prove them wrong with every deal I closed. But it wasn't easy. There were days when the fear crept in, the fear that people saw my chair first and everything else second. And then one morning, as I was going over spreadsheets in my office with a view of the Space Needle, my phone buzzed. It was Anthony, his voice bright but with an edge of nervousness that caught me off guard. "Emmy, I've got news," he said, and I could feel my heart skip a beat. "I'm getting married." The words hit me like a wave. My big brother Anthony, the man who had always put me first, had found someone. He told me about Nancy, a marketing executive he had met through work. "She was sharp," he said. "Emmy, she loves to cook. She keeps me grounded. You'll love her," he promised. I was thrilled, but there was a small knot in my stomach. I hadn't met Nancy yet. We had both been so busy, Anthony with his sustainable energy startup and me with my company, that our lives hadn't really intersected. But he was my brother, my best friend, and if he had found someone, I wanted to be happy for him. But something in the back of my mind told me that this wedding would be the moment that changed everything for both of us. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by in a blur of deadlines, product launches, and late nights at the office. But no matter how busy I got, my mind kept wandering back to the wedding. I wanted to be there for Anthony, just like he had always been there for me. I promised I'd be at the wedding, no matter how much I had to rearrange my schedule. Anthony called me one afternoon while I was stuck in traffic on I-5. "Emmy, you're still coming, right?" he asked, a teasing lilt in his voice. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, trying to hide the tiny knot of anxiety in my chest. As he talked more about the wedding, about Nancy's excitement, her plans for floral arches and the perfect menu, I felt myself being swept up in his enthusiasm. But still, there was that nagging thought at the back of my mind. Would Nancy accept me? Would she see past the chair, or would she be like so many others who judged before they even got to know me? I wanted to believe that Anthony's happiness was my happiness too. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something would change when I finally met Nancy. and I wasn't sure I was ready for that change. As the days passed, the wedding day grew closer, and with it, a storm of emotions inside me. I tried to push my anxieties aside, focusing instead on the excitement of Anthony finding someone who made him happy. After all, this was his day, his moment to celebrate the love he had found with Nancy. I had no intention of letting my insecurities get in the way. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on the joy, doubt lingered. Would Nancy be warm and welcoming, as Anthony had promised? Or would she be like so many others who saw my wheelchair as a barrier instead of just another part of me? I didn't want to let that question consume me, but it was hard to ignore. A few days before the wedding, I spent hours searching for the perfect gift. Something meaningful, something that would show Anthony and Nancy how much I cared. The last thing I wanted was to come across as trying too hard, or worse, as if I were trying to overshadow their big day. But I also wanted to contribute in a way that felt right. I decided to make a generous donation to a clean energy charity in their names. After all, Anthony was passionate about sustainability, and this was something I knew he'd appreciate. Along with the donation, I had a custom art piece made for their home, a symbol of their new life together. The total amount was $100,000, a gesture that felt both personal and fitting. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing my brother that I supported him and his future with Nancy. But even as I wrapped up the donation paperwork, doubt crept in. Would Nancy think I was trying to show off? Would she see it as just a lavish gesture? I had no way of knowing, but I tried to tell myself that it wasn't about her, it was about Anthony. He deserved to be celebrated, and this was my way of doing that. The night before the wedding, I lay awake in my apartment overlooking Lake Union. The anticipation of the big day kept me restless, but there was something else too, a deep unease that I couldn't quite shake. I'd been to plenty of fancy events before. I was used to showing up in high heels and evening gowns, rolling into boardrooms and galas with my head held high. But this was different. This was family. This was Anthony's wedding, and I desperately wanted to be accepted, not just as his sister, but as me, all of me. I spent hours thinking about what to wear. I didn't want to seem out of place, but I didn't want to hide behind a facade either. In the end, I chose a deep blue dress, one that made me feel elegant but also comfortable in my own skin. I styled my hair in a simple yet sophisticated updo, keeping my earrings, gifts from Anthony, on full display. It felt like a good choice. The day arrived, and I made my way to the venue, a stunning waterfront location with glass walls that framed the beautiful view of Puget Sound. It was everything you'd expect from a high-end wedding. Flowers, soft lighting, the hum of anticipation in the air. And as I rolled through the venue, gift in hand, I felt a mix of emotions: excitement for Anthony, nervousness about meeting Nancy, and a quiet, creeping dread. The sound of waves crashing in the distance was drowned out by the sharp voice that cut through the air like a blade. "Excuse me, can you wait a second?" I froze, turning my head to see Nancy standing there, a picture-perfect bride in a white gown. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on my wheelchair, her gaze like a cold wind. "You're Anthony's sister?" she asked, her voice clipped and distant. My stomach sank. This wasn't the warm, welcoming moment I had imagined. The crowd of guests who had been laughing and chatting seemed to fade into the background. All I could focus on was her, Nancy, her eyes lingering on my chair with a visible distaste that I couldn't ignore. "Yes, that's me, Emmy," I said, forcing a smile, extending my hand. "So nice to finally meet you." She didn't take my hand. Instead, she looked me up and down, her gaze cold and calculating. It was as if she was measuring me, deciding if I was worthy of her time. "I wasn't told Anthony had a sister like you," she said, her words dropping into the air like stones. "This is my day, Emmy. Do you know how this looks?" The sting of her words hit me hard. I wanted to say something, anything, to defend myself, to show her who I really was, but the hurt in her voice left me speechless. I forced myself to keep calm, to stand tall. "I'm just here to celebrate Anthony," I replied, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I brought a gift for you both." I gestured toward the envelope containing the $100,000 donation, but Nancy's laughter sliced through the tension. "A gift from you?" she sneered. "What, like a couple $100 you scraped together? Anthony's been carrying you your whole life, hasn't he?" Her words hit like a slap to the face. I could feel the old hurts rising up. the teasing from school, the pitying looks from strangers. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to prove herself. I straightened up in my chair, meeting her gaze directly. Actually, it's $100,000, a donation in your names to Anthony's favorite charity. And no, I don't lean on him. I run Empower Tech. Maybe you've heard of it. We make adaptive technology, global market, $500 million in revenue last year. Nancy's jaw dropped. I could see her processing what I'd just said, her mind struggling to reconcile the image of me in a wheelchair with the powerful woman I had become. But before she could say anything else, her disdain returned. "You expect me to believe that?" she asked, stepping closer, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Someone like you running a company?" I didn't back down. I was tired of hiding, tired of letting people define me by my wheelchair. "Yes, I do run a company, and I've worked hard to get where I am." Nancy didn't seem to care. She gestured toward me dismissively. "You're an embarrassment," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "Just leave, be considerate for once." The words cut deeper than any insult ever had. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she didn't deserve my brother, that she didn't belong in his life. But I swallowed my anger, choosing to walk away. "If that's what you want, I'll go," I said quietly, fighting the lump in my throat. "But the gift stays with Anthony." I turned my chair to leave, but Nancy's voice stopped me. "Oh no, if it's really $100,000, I'm keeping it," she said, grabbing the envelope from my lap. "You probably stole it from Anthony anyway." I froze. Stole it. My mind raced, fury bubbling up inside me. How dare she? Every cent I earned was from my own blood, sweat, and tears. My company wasn't just some small startup. It was a force to be reckoned with. And yet here she was, belittling everything I had worked for. Her eyes widened as she saw the fire in my gaze, but she didn't back down. "Doesn't matter. You don't belong here. Go." The words stung, but what hurt more was knowing that she had fooled Anthony, that she'd manipulated him into believing whatever story she'd created. But I couldn't ruin his day, not yet. I started to turn away, ready to leave the venue, when I heard a voice behind me. "Emmy, what's going on here?" It was Anthony. The voice rang out across the room, sharp and full of authority. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to see Anthony standing there, his face a mixture of confusion and something deeper, anger, concern, and the unmistakable protectiveness that had always been a part of him. He stepped forward, his gaze immediately locking onto Nancy. The party around us seemed to still, as if time itself had frozen in place. I couldn't help but feel a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I wanted to protect Anthony from this betrayal, to spare him the pain that was about to unfold. But on the other, I was relieved that he was finally here, finally seeing Nancy for what she truly was. "Emmy, what's going on?" Anthony's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension in the air. His eyes flicked between me and Nancy, who stood frozen in place, a look of uncertainty creeping across her face. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say anything, Nancy's voice sliced through the silence. "It's not what you think, Anthony," she said quickly, her smile forced and brittle. "I was just surprised, that's all." "Surprised?" Anthony repeated, his voice rising. "You called my sister an embarrassment, you told her to leave." His eyes flashed with anger, a raw, protective rage that I hadn't seen in years. "She's been through more than you could ever imagine, Nancy, more than you'll ever understand." Nancy took a step back, her face paling as she stammered for words. I didn't mean it like that. I was just shocked, Anthony. I didn't expect this." She motioned toward me with a wave of her hand, as if I were an afterthought. But Anthony was having none of it. He stepped closer to her, his eyes narrowing. "Shocked? Really? You don't get to disrespect my family like that. You don't get to treat my sister like she's less than you. She's been my everything since we lost our parents. She's the reason I'm standing here today." I could feel my breath catch in my throat as I watched the confrontation unfold. This was my brother, my rock, fighting for me. It was both overwhelming and humbling. But I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the truth. This was about Anthony finally seeing who Nancy truly was. Nancy's face reddened as she tried to regain her composure, but it was clear she wasn't prepared for the wrath of someone who had been fighting their whole life for respect and dignity. "You don't understand, Anthony. I can't have her here," Nancy spat, her words dripping with disdain. "My colleagues, my boss, they're all here. Do you know how this looks?" I wanted to say something then, to scream at her, to let her know how much her words had hurt me, but I stayed quiet, letting Anthony handle it. This was his moment to decide if she was worth keeping in his life. And then, something unexpected happened. A familiar voice broke through the tension. Enough! It was Lucas. I turned to see my boyfriend, Lucas, walking toward us with purpose. His calm, steady presence was like a breath of fresh air in the midst of the storm. Lucas was the CEO of a tech firm that partnered with my company, Empower Tech. He was tall, confident, and grounded, the perfect balance to my sometimes chaotic energy. I had never expected him to be here so soon, but his calm demeanor was exactly what I needed in that moment. "I've heard enough," Lucas said, his voice firm and clear. He stood next to me, his arms subtly brushing mine in a quiet show of support. "Nancy, your behavior is unacceptable." The room seemed to quiet down even more as the weight of his words hung in the air. Nancy's eyes widened and she took a step back, but Lucas wasn't finished. "My company values respect, inclusion, and equality. What you've just done, what you've said, it's not just personal, Nancy. It's a liability. And I'm done, you're done." Nancy's face twisted with disbelief. "What do you mean I'm done? You can't just fire me. I'm marrying Anthony." "Not anymore." Lucas shot back without hesitation. "There's no wedding, not while you treat my fiancé like this." Anthony's voice softened as he turned to me. "Emmy, I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I could see the guilt in his eyes. This was his wedding day, and here he was, confronting the woman he thought he was going to marry. But I wasn't angry at him. I knew he hadn't seen it coming. He didn't know what she was really like, and I didn't blame him for that. Lucas, however, wasn't done with Nancy yet. His calm, composed demeanor never wavered as he turned back to her. "You've disrespected Emmy in a way I can't ignore. I won't let it slide, Nancy. You'll be covering the costs of this wedding, all of them." Nancy's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. It was clear she wasn't expecting this kind of fallout. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, knowing that her actions, her cruelty, had finally caught up with her. The room was thick with tension, but it was clear that the atmosphere had shifted. People were talking, whispering, and some were even backing away from Nancy, who stood frozen, her future slipping away in real time. Anthony turned to me then, his eyes softening. "Emmy, this is your day too. We'll turn this around. We'll make sure you know you're loved and valued." Before I could respond, a surprising thing happened. Anthony's eyes lit up and I saw a glimmer of mischief in them. "Mia," he called, and my assistant came rushing over, wide-eyed with excitement. "Let's make a change of plans," he said, grinning. "Let's turn this whole situation into something else, something better." "What are you talking about?" I asked, a bit lost. He laughed, taking out his phone. "I've got a few calls to make. We'll turn this disaster into a celebration of something truly special." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Anthony made calls to friends, colleagues, and even some familiar faces from Empower Tech. The venue was transformed in a matter of hours, and before I knew it, the mood had shifted from tense to electric. The guests who had gathered were now buzzing with excitement, and the energy in the air was palpable. And then, the biggest surprise of all happened. Lucas, my calm and collected boyfriend, took me by the hand, leading me to the center of the venue where a new scene was unfolding before me. "Drop to one knee." "Emmy," Lucas said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You're the strongest, smartest person I know. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to my eyes as I nodded, my heart full to bursting. The room erupted in cheers as I hugged Lucas tightly. Anthony was beside me, his arms around both of us, his joy and pride for me shining brighter than ever. Nancy, on the other hand, was nowhere to be seen, but I didn't care. The people who mattered were here. The people who saw me, not just my chair, were here. And for the first time that day, I felt truly seen, truly loved. The aftermath of Lucas's proposal was still settling in when Anthony pulled me aside, his eyes soft but filled with that familiar protective love. The wedding that was supposed to mark his new beginning had been upended, and yet, in some strange way, it had brought us even closer. It was as if the universe had a way of forcing us to face our fears and come out stronger on the other side. I was still reeling from the emotional roller coaster, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the day I had expected, but it was shaping up to be something far more meaningful. The laughter, the congratulations, and the warmth that had quickly replaced the tension made me realize that sometimes life had a funny way of working things out. And as for Nancy, well, I wasn't wasting another thought on her. But Anthony, my brother, my rock, was a different story. I could see that the betrayal stung him deeply. It wasn't just about the insult to me. It was about the woman he thought he knew, the woman he had planned to spend his life with, showing her true colors at the worst possible moment. I found him standing by the edge of the venue, looking out at the water, his back slightly hunched as if the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders. I rolled over, my chair quietly gliding across the smooth floor. When he heard me approaching, he turned, his face hard with the aftermath of the confrontation. "Hey," I said softly, trying to break the silence that had been hanging between us. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, Emmy," he replied, his voice low. "I'm sorry you had to go through that today. You didn't deserve any of it." I shook my head, my heart swelling with affection for him. "Don't apologize. This isn't your fault, Anthony. I know you wanted this day to be perfect, but sometimes people show their true colors, and we have to see it for what it is." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. His voice caught and he stopped, trying to regain his composure. "I thought I knew her. I thought she was everything I wanted, but I was wrong. I should have seen it sooner. You've been with me through thick and thin, Emmy. You've always had my back, and I should have done the same for you." I reached out, placing my hand on his. "You do. You've always had my back, Anthony, and I've got yours no matter what." He looked down at me, his eyes full of gratitude, but there was something else there too, regret. "I just didn't want you to feel like you weren't welcome today. You're my sister, you mean everything to me, and I let her make you feel less than. I'm sorry for that." I squeezed his hand gently. "You don't need to apologize. You're the best brother I could ever ask for. You've been through so much, and you've carried me when I needed it. I won't let anyone, not even her, make me feel small. You've taught me that." He smiled, the tightness in his shoulders easing just a bit. "I just want you to know that you're more than enough. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me, not to anyone else. You're already amazing." Before I could respond, the sound of someone clearing their throat caught our attention. We turned to see Lucas standing behind us, a quiet smile on his face. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but there's someone who wants to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow, confused. "Who?" Lucas gave a small nod toward the entrance. Standing there, with a look of uncertainty on his face, was one of the last people I expected to see, Nancy. My stomach tightened, and I instinctively gripped the arms of my chair. What could she possibly want now? Anthony stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Do you want Nancy?" he asked, his voice filled with a quiet anger. Nancy hesitated, shifting from foot to foot. She looked at the ground, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I made a huge mistake today, I know that, and I'm sorry. I almost didn't believe my ears, apologizing after everything that had happened." She took a deep breath and continued. "I shouldn't have said what I did. I didn't mean it. I don't know, I was overwhelmed. I've always been so focused on the image I project. And when I saw you, Emmy, I was scared of what people might think. But that's no excuse." She finally lifted her eyes, and for the first time I saw vulnerability there, something raw and unguarded. "I was wrong. I've been wrong this whole time, and I owe you an apology. Not just to you, Anthony, but to you, Emmy. I know I can't take back what I said, but I can at least say I'm sorry." I stared at her, not sure how to react. The apology felt empty, like she was saying the words without truly understanding the damage she had caused. But there was something in her expression that made me pause. Maybe she wasn't entirely the person I thought she was. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for growth even for someone like her. Anthony's gaze softened, but his words were firm. "I appreciate the apology, Nancy, but this isn't something you just fix with words. It's going to take time, and I'm not sure if that's something you're willing to do." Nancy nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I understand, and I'll do whatever it takes, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you both." I looked at her for a long moment, the air thick with unspoken tension. The woman who had made me feel small, the woman who had tried to tear down my relationship with Anthony, was now asking for forgiveness. It felt surreal. I took a deep breath. "I don't know what this means, Nancy," I said slowly. "But I think it's important to give people the chance to change. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but we can start somewhere." Anthony turned to me, his eyes searching mine for reassurance. I nodded, my heart a little lighter than before. "Yeah, we can start over, but only if you're willing to prove it, Nancy, and that starts with showing respect for both of us every single day." Her eyes filled with something that looked like relief. "I will, I promise." And just like that, the first step toward healing was taken. The rest would be up to time, up to actions, not just words. As the evening wore on, the energy in the venue shifted again. While the storm hadn't fully passed, the cloud hanging over us had begun to lift. There was still healing to be done, but for the first time I could see that change was possible even for Nancy. Lucas, ever the steady presence, squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered, leaning in. I smiled, my heart still racing from everything that had transpired. "I'm starting to believe that." The night unfolded with a sense of uncertainty hanging in the air, but also the beginnings of something new. The drama that had started out of nowhere was starting to calm, replaced with the potential for something more, something better. I could feel it in the way Anthony was standing beside me now, his posture more relaxed, his usual humor starting to return. He had always been my protector, my cheerleader, but seeing him stand up for me, seeing him stand against Nancy, had shifted something between us. We weren't just siblings anymore, we were warriors, fighting side by side. And as for Nancy, I wasn't sure what to think yet. Her apology had caught me off guard, but the more I replayed it in my mind, the more I realized it hadn't been some empty gesture. There had been real vulnerability in her voice, something I hadn't expected to see from her. Whether or not she could change was a different story, but for now, I was willing to give her a chance. One step at a time. The night wore on, the rhythm of the wedding slowly ebbing into the background. People were mingling again, some of them still in shock from the confrontation, while others continued to enjoy the festivities. But my mind wasn't on the wedding anymore. My thoughts kept drifting to Anthony and what was next. After everything we had been through, after all the betrayals and misunderstandings, I knew things couldn't go back to the way they were. It wasn't just about me and Nancy anymore. It was about me and my brother, our relationship, and the boundaries we needed to set going forward. Later that evening, as I found myself outside by the water, staring at the moonlight reflecting off the Puget Sound, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Anthony standing there, his expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded. "Yeah, I'm just thinking." He smiled, his eyes softening. "About what?" "About us," I said. "About everything that's happened. I don't think it'll ever be the same, Anthony. Not with Nancy, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we're finally seeing the truth about who we are and what matters most." He took a deep breath, his gaze on the water. "I've been thinking the same thing. This whole thing, it's made me realize that I've been putting everyone else's expectations first, and I've neglected what's been right in front of me. You, Emmy, you've always been my family, and that hasn't changed. It never will." Tears stung my eyes as I looked at him, my heart full. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. "I'm proud of how far you've come. I'm proud of the man you've become." He looked at me, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You've always had my back, Emmy. You're my heart, and I don't want to lose that. Not for anything, not for anyone." We stood there for a long moment, the weight of the past few hours settling in, but also the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new for both of us. The sound of laughter carried from inside the venue, and we knew it was time to go back in. But before we did, I felt a shift, one that I knew would follow us long after this night. No matter what happened with Nancy, we had each other, and nothing could take that away. As the night continued, the tension from earlier slowly dissipated, replaced by the feeling of reconciliation and possibility. Anthony was with me every step of the way, and Lucas remained my constant anchor, the person who had proven time and time again that love could thrive in the most unexpected places. Soon, the music started, and the soft hum of voices filled the air again. But this time, it felt different. People were genuinely celebrating, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly a part of something, not just as someone in a wheelchair, not as someone who had to fight for every ounce of respect, but as a sister, a friend, a future wife. Nancy had retreated into the shadows after her apology, and though I could sense she was still trying to salvage her dignity, I didn't feel the need to engage. The reality was, no apology could take away the hurt she had caused. But it had opened the door for something more, the possibility of change. Maybe, in time, she could prove herself. But for now, the only thing that mattered was the love and respect that was growing between me, Anthony, and Lucas. The next few days were filled with reflection. As the reality of the situation sank in, I realized how much of my life had been about proving myself, proving that I could be more than the wheelchair, more than the girl people assumed was weak. I had spent so much time fighting for respect, fighting to be seen, that I hadn't realized the power of simply living my truth. The wedding, the confrontation, and even the apology from Nancy had forced me to look inward, to truly understand my worth, not just in the eyes of others, but in my own eyes. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had already earned my place in this world. I had built a company that was changing lives. I had a partner who saw me for all I was, strengths and flaws alike. And most importantly, I had my brother, who had always been my rock, standing beside me, ready to face whatever the future had in store for us. Days turned into weeks, and though the scars from that day would take time to heal, I felt stronger than ever. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about learning from it. About understanding that people, even those closest to you, could disappoint you, but they could also surprise you, change, and grow. Nancy and Anthony hadn't talked much after the wedding. She had reached out a few times, apologizing again, but it was clear that she still had a long way to go before she could truly earn Anthony's trust. As for me, I wasn't holding my breath, but I was open to seeing where things could go if she was sincere about her change. And for me and Anthony, we were a team. We had always been. And no matter what happened next, nothing would change that. As the months passed, my life continued to evolve. Empower Tech was thriving, and Lucas and I were building something beautiful together. I still had moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if people really saw me for who I was, but they were becoming fewer and farther between. The future was unknown, but one thing was for sure. No matter what happened, I would face it head-on, with the strength of my family by my side. As the weeks passed, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm. There were still lingering questions, particularly surrounding Nancy and her place in Anthony's life, but I no longer felt like I was constantly on edge. Things weren't perfect, far from it, but they were better. Anthony and I had grown closer, and Lucas and I were building a life together. I had been so consumed with the past that I hadn't fully realized how much I had to be grateful for. Still, the shadow of what had happened at the wedding hung over me. It wasn't something I could just brush off. No matter how much time passed, there was a part of me that wondered if I could ever truly let go of the hurt. Nancy's cruel words, her dismissiveness, her complete lack of empathy, it wasn't something you easily forget. But part of healing was learning how to move forward, not necessarily forgetting, but learning to live despite the pain. It was a Friday afternoon when the call came. I was in my office at Empower Tech, the hum of my desk computer filling the silence. Lucas had just left for a business trip, and I was wrapping up some final details before the weekend. That's when the phone buzzed on my desk. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it caught my attention. I picked it up, my voice neutral, prepared for the worst. "Hello? Emmy, it's Nancy," came the hesitant voice on the other end. My stomach tightened at the sound of her name. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I paused for a moment before answering, my voice careful. "What's going on?" "I know we haven't spoken much since the wedding," she said, her words soft but filled with sincerity. "And I understand if you're angry with me. I'm not calling to make excuses, Emmy. I wanted to say I'm truly sorry for everything." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by her tone. It wasn't what I'd expected at all. "Nancy, I appreciate the apology," I said cautiously. "But you need to understand that what you said, what you did, it wasn't just hurtful. It was a betrayal, and I don't know if I can just let that go." "I get that," she said quickly. "I've spent the last few weeks reflecting on everything, on how I acted, how I treated you, and I realize now that I was wrong, that I let my own insecurities get in the way of seeing you for who you really are. I was scared, Emmy. I didn't know how to deal with the fact that Anthony's family was so different from mine. I've never had to think about things like that, and it made me uncomfortable. But that's no excuse for how I treated you." Her words hung in the air between us. I was trying to process them, but part of me still couldn't shake the memory of that night, the coldness in her voice, the way she had dismissed me like I was a burden to be tolerated, not a person to be respected. It wasn't easy to let go of that. "You're right," I finally said, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. "You were wrong, but I'm not sure that a simple apology can fix everything. It's not just about what you said, it's about what you believed in that moment, and I can't just forget that." "I understand," Nancy said, her voice breaking a little. "But I want to make it right, Emmy. I don't want to lose Anthony, and I don't want to lose the chance to prove to you that I can change. It's going to take time, I know that, but I'm asking for a chance." I sighed, leaning forward in my chair. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her. I wasn't sure if I could ever forget what had happened. But I knew one thing: life had a funny way of giving people second chances, even when they didn't deserve them. "I'm willing to give you a chance, Nancy," I said quietly. "But it's going to take time, and it's going to take more than words. It's going to take actions. You've got to prove that you're willing to change." "I will," she replied, her voice filled with conviction. "I promise." The conversation with Nancy marked a turning point. It wasn't an instant fix, and it wasn't a clean slate, but it was the first step toward healing for both of us. Over the next few weeks, Nancy made several attempts to reach out, small gestures at first, trying to rebuild the trust that had been broken. She sent flowers to my office with a handwritten note saying she was working on herself. She invited me to lunch, and though I hesitated, I agreed. It wasn't easy. Every part of me wanted to reject her, to hold onto the pain and keep her at arm's length. But a part of me also wanted to believe that people could change, that they could grow if they were willing to face their own flaws. And as much as it terrified me, I decided to give her that chance. We met for lunch at a small cafe in Seattle a few weeks later. It was awkward at first, the silence between us almost deafening. But as the meal went on, I started to see a different side of Nancy, a side I hadn't expected. She talked openly about her insecurities, about how she had been raised in an environment that emphasized image over substance. How, as a child, she had been taught to hide any vulnerability, to never show weakness. She admitted that seeing how strong I was despite everything I'd been through, had made her feel threatened, and she didn't know how to handle that feeling. "I didn't know how to react to you, Emmy," she said, her voice quieter now. "And instead of embracing who you are, I pushed you away. I know it's no excuse, but I just want you to know that I'm trying to understand now." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and I saw that she was trying. Not just with her words, but with her actions. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no arrogance. Just a quiet, painful honesty. And it made me realize that maybe, just maybe, she was worth this second chance. "I'm still not sure where this will go," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I'm willing to try. I think you're starting to get it, Nancy, but you have a long way to go before I can say I trust you again." She nodded, her eyes sincere. "I understand, and I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to make it right." The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. The damage had been done, and the healing process was slow. But something had shifted in me that day. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about the other person, it was about me too. It was about choosing to let go of the past so that I could move forward, free of the weight of anger and resentment. As the weeks passed, I continued to build my life with Lucas and to support Anthony in his own healing journey. Things were far from perfect, but they were better, and that was enough for now. As the months went on, life settled into a rhythm that I could finally call my own. The pain from that day, the wedding, the confrontation, the betrayal, was still there, but it had dulled with time. Anthony and I were closer than ever, and I had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the times when I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. The world may have seen a woman in a wheelchair, but my family, my company, and Lucas saw me for who I truly was, and that was worth more than any external validation. Nancy had come a long way since that fateful day at the wedding. While we still weren't exactly best friends, we had built a foundation of understanding and respect, something that I had never imagined possible. She had shown up time and time again, not with grand gestures, but with small, meaningful actions. She had apologized more than once and had proved she was willing to do the work to make things right. And while there were days when I questioned whether I could ever fully trust her again, I had to admit that she was trying. And that was enough for now. Lucas and I were planning a trip to visit my parents' grave just outside Seattle. It had been a while since I'd taken the time to reflect on their lives, their legacy, and the love they had shown me. It was the anniversary of their passing, and I wanted to honor them in a way that felt right. They had taught me so much about resilience, about standing tall even in the face of adversity, about holding onto your integrity no matter what the world threw at you. Anthony, always the rock, had insisted on coming with us. "You shouldn't do this alone," he had said. "They were my parents, too. I want to be there with you." And so, on a crisp autumn morning, we drove to the small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The air was fresh, the kind of cool that made you feel alive, and as we walked to the gravesite, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long while, the weight of my past didn't feel so heavy. It wasn't that I had forgotten the struggles, the loss, the challenges I'd faced. It was that I had learned to carry them with me, to honor them, but not to let them define me. We stood there in silence for a while, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. Finally, Anthony turned to me, his eyes misty. "You know, Emmy," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Mom and Dad would be so proud of you, of everything you've done." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at the gravestones, imagining their faces, their warm smiles. "I hope so," I whispered. "I hope they know how much I've tried to live up to what they taught me, how much they meant to me." Anthony wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "They do. They've always known." We stayed there for a while longer, talking quietly, reflecting on the past and imagining what the future would hold. When we finally left, I felt a sense of closure, a sense that the pieces of my life were finally falling into place. My parents had given me a foundation built on love, and now I was building my future on the same principles. Back at the apartment that evening, as I sat with Lucas, we reflected on everything that had happened. The challenges, the pain, the heartbreak, but also the growth, the healing, the new beginnings. "You've come so far," Lucas said, his voice tender as he took my hand in his. "You've built a life that's not defined by what happened to you, but by who you are. You're incredible, Emmy." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his words sink deep into my soul. "I'm still figuring it out," I admitted. "Some days are harder than others, but I'm learning, and I know that no matter what comes next, I have the strength to handle it. I don't have to fight alone anymore." He leaned in and kissed me softly. "You never have to fight alone, not as long as I'm here." And in that moment, I realized that everything I had gone through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the doubts, had led me to this point. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. I had the love of my family, the respect of my peers, and the unwavering support of the man I loved. The next day, as I prepared for another big presentation with Empower Tech, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. The fear, the insecurity, the doubt, I had learned to push those aside. I had spent too many years trying to fit into a world that wasn't built for me, trying to prove that I belonged. But now, I was learning to show up just as I was, not needing to prove anything to anyone, but simply to exist as myself. Anthony had called earlier, his usual teasing tone lightening my mood. "I heard you've got a big presentation today. Don't mess it up, sis," he had joked before adding more seriously, "You've got this, you always do." And for the first time, I truly believed him. I wasn't defined by my wheelchair or by anyone else's perception of me. I was defined by my actions, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to the people I loved. As I rolled into the boardroom, ready to present the latest innovations from Empower Tech, I stood tall, proud of what I had built and even prouder of the person I had become. The road ahead would still have its challenges. There would be days of doubt, moments of fear, but I was no longer afraid of the unknown. I had learned that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined, and no matter what came next, I would face it with strength, grace, and the love of my family by my side. The sky outside the window was endless, just like the possibilities that lay ahead. I had fought for my place in this world, and I wasn't about to stop now. This was just the beginning. The best was yet to come. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've learned anything from my story, remember this: you are capable of more than you think. No matter the obstacles, no matter the setbacks, you have the power to create the life you deserve. If you want to keep following my journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next chapter. Keep fighting for your truth, and I'll meet you there.